again today, talking about once again the Green Slush Fund. And I'm going to focus in on one particular individual and how the Green Slush Fund, how it's been a win-win-win for the Environment Minister, while it's been a lose-lose-lose for Canadian taxpayers. And specifically, my focus will be on how the Liberal Environment Minister, propped up by the NDP, is directly tied to the Green Slush Fund. He was tied to it before he became the Environment Minister, as he was a key player in it. And then while he was the Environment Minister, and that's currently, he owned shares in the company that benefited from the Green Slush Fund, and also added $750 million of taxpayer money to it. And it's the same minister that's contributing to the Green Slush Fund, is ruining our forest sector and natural resources while also benefiting from their demise. So let's get into it. The current minister, and I can't use his name obviously because we're in the chamber, and how is the minister tied to it specifically before? Well, most people will remember the infamous picture of the Environment Minister in an orange jumpsuit. He was arrested after scaling the CN Tower to deliberately break the law, and as he phrased it, as a tool. That happened in 2001, just for people's timeline. So 2001, 23 years ago. 8 years after that moment, he would end up lobbying for a company called Cycle Capital. And most of you know by now Cycle Capital and how it's been involved in the Green Slush Fund. Most of the way through my speech, Mr. Speaker, I will be quoting my colleague from South Shore, St. Margaret's, as he's done a lot of research into this issue and really exposed a lot of what the Green Slush Fund has become. Quote, Cycle Capital has a CEO who is also a member of the SDTC, or the Green Slush Fund board. Her name is Andrée-Lise Mathieu. One director was particularly aggressive. She was appointed in 2016 by the Prime Minister. Her name, once again, is Andrée-Lise Mathieu. She runs a venture capital firm called Cycle Capital in green technologies. Andrée-Lise Mathieu's companies during her time on the board received $250 million in grants from the Green Slush Fund. While she was on the board, $114 million went to green companies that she had invested in. And at that time, Mr. Speaker, guess who her strategic counsel was? Because, again, I can't say his name in the House. Quote, the current radical Liberal Environment Minister proudly lists he was a strategic counsel for Cycle Capital for a decade before he was elected in 2019. And guess what he did in that role? He was a paid in-house lobbyist. During his time as a paid lobbyist for Cycle Capital received $172 million of the $250 million that came out of the Green Slush Fund. Quote, in the year and a half before the Environment Minister was elected in 2019, he lobbied the PMO, and I said 25 times, according to the lobbyist registry, on behalf of Cycle Capital for SDTC, or Green Slush Funds. He was a very successful lobbyist, obviously as part of the Environment Minister's reward. He got shares as compensation in Cycle Capital, and I'll be referring to those shares very soon. So now let's move into the term as current Environment Minister. Shockingly, quote, shockingly, the minister still owns shares in Cycle Capital. But because of the government not disclosing the documents, we don't know how much. And that's really the reason why we're here today, Mr. Speaker, why this has gone on so long, is because these documents, the Green Slush Fund, the redacted documents that are covered up today, likely have covered up what the current minister's involvement in the SDTC is, and also how much he is benefiting from it personally. We know a much more direct number. We know he's generally profiting from the Green Slush Fund, but this would get a lot more specific, Mr. Speaker, and I would add a lot more damning as a result. What do we know is the company that he still owns shares in has directly benefited from the Green Slush Fund? Quote, Cycle Capital, since Andrée-Lise Mathieu was put on the board in 2016, tripled in value from $200 million to $600 million. So again, the company that he has shares in has, multiplied in value over 300%. Another quote, the fund itself massively expanded under the current Minister of the Environment. As Cabinet Minister of Government, he participated in discussions that gave the Green Slush Fund another $750 million, or $750 million, of which over a quarter has gone to that company. So here's a minister, it's enough he benefited from it as a lobbyist and as a shareholder in this particular company. Now he's the minister, he's dumping in money into this fund that's benefiting the company that he still has shares in. Most folks call that a conflict of interest. The commissioner calls it a conflict of interest. Most Canadians call it a conflict of interest, but this government, guess what they're doing, Madam Speaker? They're covering it up. Another quote, not only does the line extend from the Prime Minister's office, which handpicked and appointed the chair over her conflicts, even though it was warned about them, the PCO has said that's where it came from, and not only has the Prime Minister's office tried to thwart the House of Commons by asking departments to redact their documents from the disclosure the House of Commons asked for from the SCDC, we have an actual Minister of the Crown who happens to be the Minister of the Environment who might have some interest in SCTC and its performance and is actually financially gaining from it. Madam Speaker, it doesn't get worse than this, but I'm going to argue it does get worse. I'll read on. He has directly ensured that the fund his own company benefited from, and as many Liberal friends did, will remain well stocked with your taxpayer dollars well into the future. So it comes to the last section of my speech, Madam Speaker. It'll take a little while, though. The same minister, we just have a bunch of forestry closures that I've been speaking about, been doing videos about it back in my home province of British Columbia. We've lost 24 mills since 2016. As part of the result of this particular minister, oil and gas is seeing its limitations with emissions caps. We even hear Indigenous chiefs of the Haisla and Wet'suwet'en, et cetera, all concerned about these emissions caps limiting the prosperity of their people because it will limit any future liquefied natural gas expansion. But the same minister is doing his best to limit our resource development, ruin our forest sector, ruin our oil and gas sector with emissions caps, and bring in the carbon tax that is making life unaffordable for all Canadians, while benefiting from the whole downturn and the demise of the resource sector himself. It's a shame. This is from a BIV article, Canfor's BC mill closures prompts call to stabilize timber supply. And this is one way the minister is limiting resource development. It's initiating and bringing in the 30 by 30 initiative. And I'll quote from the article, what's been limiting the timber supply lately is government policies, he said, including a 30 by 30 conservation goal and ecosystem-based land management. And the minister, of course, is all over this. He's one of the guys that's not just stopping at 30 by 30, he's actually going on to 50 by 50. And this is from the ministers from the Canadian government themselves, and I'll quote the minister in a second. The Government of Canada is also making progress toward achieving the 25% by 2025 and 30% by 2030 targets for area-based conservation, as our network of protected areas plays a vital role in conserving and restoring healthy, resilient ecosystems and contributing to the recovery of species at risk. Quote, this week, we'll be announcing new funding for habitat stewardship. We will continue our steady progress toward halting and reversing nature loss in Canada by 2030 and achieving a full recovery for nature by 2050. And this kind of speaks to the ambition of the minister. This doesn't stop at 2030. It's been damaging enough with the 30 by 30 initiative. Now he's going to go on to 50 by 50. But it's not just that. We'll talk about, the emissions caps have been a talk of many of my colleagues in Alberta and British Columbia about the resource, the oil and gas sector. I'll just say this, from my perspective in northeastern BC, many will be familiar with the largest capital project in Canadian history is LNG Canada. It takes gas from fields in my part of the province in northeastern BC, sends it down a pipeline to Kitimat to be exported to the world. And by doing that, we can actually reduce emissions around the world by up to 50%. It's been a great story for Canada. It's been a great story for us in northeastern BC. And it's really a service to our allies who are asking for our natural gas. There's been many countries that have come to ask the Prime Minister for our natural gas, and he's brushed them off by saying there's no business case for it. I spoke about this at a natural resource forum in Prince George, 1,000 people in the room, and I said, because everybody knows saying there's no business case for natural gas is ridiculous. I asked the question of the room, and I think it was unanimous that everybody applauded when I said, is there a business case for natural gas? Well, of course there is. But this is the same sort of strategic, deliberate, getting in the way of resource development and expansion by this environment minister and his prime minister. This is what they're all about. So again, we're talking about emissions caps, and anyway, that emissions cap that they're putting on, and he's continuing with, will completely limit our ability to get more natural gas to the world that our allies are asking for. Quote, this is Minister of the Environment himself. It's an economic strategy as much as it is an environmental strategy. And listen to that keyword, strategy, Madam Speaker. I'll revisit that in a minute. Because if this is strategic in what he's doing, because some could accuse him of accidentally ruining the natural resource sector, but if he's saying it's actually strategic, well, let's take him at his word. And if it is strategic, then he looks like deliberately ruining our natural resource sector in the country. And we'll move to also what he's been saying about the carbon tax. And this is the same, of course, minister that's been the face of really the carbon tax for the Prime Minister for the last number of years. And this is a quote that he's promoting the carbon tax. This is the Minister of the Environment. Of course, we're going to continue with the carbon tax because it creates jobs. The minister said at a House of Commons committee studying emissions policies. It helps us promote investment and reduce GHG emissions. Investments that he himself is benefiting from in the Green Slush Fund. So there's a key word there, and I think I need to repeat that, Madam Speaker, because it's so significant, because it just doesn't let the minister off the hook. It's bad enough that he's just, taking taxpayer monies in an ethically wrong way. This is actually saying that he strategically is doing that, and he's even admitting that he's going to be personally benefiting from it. So here, I'll read that one more time. Of course, we're going to continue with carbon tax because it creates jobs, which we all know is not true. The minister told the House of Commons committee, listen to these words, it helps us to, this is carbon tax, it helps us to promote investment. Investment in what? And this whole conversation is around the Green Slush Fund, Madam Speaker. All around his questionable practices around these, the capital, cycle capital that he personally is involved in, that he's personally directed money to feed into and personally, again, benefited from himself. So I think what makes it worse for me is that I go home to my constituents who pay their bills by either forestry jobs or working in the oil and gas sector, and they're good jobs, and they put warm meals on tables, and they put roofs over their heads. This same minister who's strategically trying to ruin the natural gas and resource sector, including forestry, is the one that's actually personally benefiting from it as an individual, Madam Speaker. And I think that's the argument that I'm making today, is that this minister needs a close look. It isn't just a general, the Liberal, the NDP Liberal government is trying to cover this up for just sort of this random reasons. I think there's something a lot more sinister what's going on here, and who's actually benefited directly from this Green Slush Fund. We already see directly that he's benefited. We don't know how much. Again, that's why the documents, I believe, are redacted. How much of those shares, how many shares does he have? How much are those shares worth? That's the mystery that we all need to know, and Canadians want to know. They deserve to. The same person that sits across the way and the person that sits beside him is the natural resource minister. Both of the two together are ruining our natural resource sector in the country, ruining it. Again, 24 mills shut down since 2016. Our limit to get natural gas to the world has been capped by these two individuals, backed and propped up by the Prime Minister. And I think it's a shame. But again, once people understand that it isn't just that he's stopping it, but he's actually putting dollars in his own bank account by doing so, I think it's utterly shameful and needs to be exposed. And that's why we spent so much time in this place trying to get to the bottom of the issue, trying to get unredacted documents to the truth of what's going on with this SDTC, or Green Slush Fund as we call it. So, in conclusion, Madam Speaker, the minister got rich before he was the Environment Minister. The minister got richer as the Minister of the Environment. And lastly, Canadians are losing their jobs and livelihoods because of the minister's radical policies and their shutting down of our natural resource economy, Madam Speaker. And I started off by saying something. I said it's been a win-win-win for the current Environment Minister, and I'd say the Natural Resource Minister and the Prime Minister, and it's been a lose-lose-lose for Canadians and the Canadian taxpayers that pay all our wages, frankly, in this House, and it's shameful. I think the Canadians out there are expecting us to get to the bottom of it. I know people watch these videos, the amount of views that we're getting, they really want to get to the bottom of this corruption. And the polls are reflecting how unpopular this current Prime Minister is and the NDP Liberals across the way. Canadians are wanting a carbon tax election, and it's based on this kind of stuff and this kind of corruption. We have members from Calgary, members in this chamber that have talked about many levels of corruption that this government's involved in. It just doesn't stop with the Green Slush Fund. But, I mean, the Green Slush Fund, and I'll summarize just for the folks watching out there, if they forgot about the amount of money that we're talking about here. We're not just talking about a few $1,000s, and that would still be bad, Madam Speaker, if it was that. The scandal, a quick summary, at least $390 million has gone to Liberal insiders, including our own Environment Minister, including the NDP Liberal Environment Minister. Second of all, they're trying to hide what went on in that whole transaction and with the Green Slush Fund. We know that countless board members of the SDTC, the board members themselves were directly involved in making decisions about who would get the money out of this board. And then they were actually making decisions, sending money to their own companies to benefit from those particular decisions. $400 million has already gone. The minister, as I've referred to, has topped up the Green Slush Fund with another $750 million. And, Madam Speaker, I would just say that, Canadians are tired of this kind of corruption, and it's time for us to have a carbon tax election. And I look forward to any questions members in the House will have. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government is going to listen to the Auditor General of Canada and the RCMP, not the Conservative Party on this issue. On the issue of foreign interference, let's be very clear. We're talking about Canadians that have been murdered, extortion, and there has been direct links to foreign interference into the leadership of the Conservative Party. The leader of the Conservative Party chooses not to get the security clearance. Canadians have a right to know what it is that the leader of the Conservative Party is hiding from them. What has happened in his past, Madam Speaker? Canadians have a right to know. The question is related to, now we find out that the member from Calgary Nose Hill, in fact, was intimidated by foreign interference to the degree in which she literally withdrew from the leader of the Conservative Party's opponent, Madam Speaker. There's all sorts of things that are linked here. My question to the member, will he not at the very least acknowledge the honest and honourable thing for the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada to do is to do what every other leader has done and get the security clearance required, Madam Speaker?
The honourable member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
And sadly, Madam Speaker, I'm going to ask Canadians out there that are watching right now. The speech that I just made was about the Green Slush Fund, how basically the current Environment Minister, before, during, and after, has benefited from the Green Slush Fund and is destroying our natural resource economy across the country. That was the topic that I talked about at length. And the minister, or sorry, the member across the way, he wishes he was a minister, I think didn't ask me one question about what the speech was about, or, you know, I think what all Canadians are asking, why is the current minister who's involved deeply in this scandal, why is he still sitting on the front bench as Environment Minister today?
Order. There's individuals who are trying to participate on both sides of the House, and when someone already has asked a question, if they have supplementary questions, they should wait till the appropriate time. Questions and comments. The Honourable Member Central, Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my fellow British Columbian, the Member of Parliament for Prince George, Peace River, and Northern Rockies for his speech. He is absolutely correct. The government members that have debated today, Madam Speaker, are totally off topic. The member, in this case, gave a complete speech of why the SDTC process only helped insiders close to the Liberal government and those that benefit. Madam Speaker, I've spoken a number of times about how, in my riding, constituents who were ruled ineligible to receive the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, they were forced to pay back their monies. The Auditor General found that in the STTC Green Slush Fund, there were ineligible companies as well. Does the member believe that those monies should be recovered by the government? Those companies should pay back those monies that they were ineligible to receive in the first place?
Member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Yes, absolutely, Madam Speaker. You know, Canadian taxpayers, I talk to them every day, and they talk to me. They come into my office talking about how CRA is coming after them for small amounts of taxes that the CRA believes that they should have paid, and they're often small amounts. They're stressed. They're in tears about this money, and it's all going to fund this kind of garbage, this kind of program where they're actually making out in the hundreds of millions of dollars lining the Liberal pocket friends. It's shameful, and they should recover every last penny of the corrupt money that's been lost up to date.
And comments. Our member for St. John Rossi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to Member Opsa for his speech. I respect him greatly. But Madam Speaker, there's a report today in the CBC, and I quote, "Agents of the Indian government allegedly attempted to derail candidate's campaign for the leadership of the Conservative Party in 2022, according to sources who spoke to Radio Canada. The MP from Calgary-Nose Hill was pressured to withdraw her support for that candidate, which she did." So my question to the member opposite is, and one thing that's becoming more and more clear is that there's pressure on the leader opposite to get a security clearance. He's not doing it. Is there something he's hiding? That's my question. Thank you.
The honourable member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Yeah, once again, I'm here talking today about the Green Slush Fund, and I'd say the member across the way, which I respect as well, was one of the members that's constantly got up in front of cameras and saying he's got a problem with the current Prime Minister and would like him to move over. We could talk about that today too, if you like, because you're not asking questions about what I'm asking you about, but I respect the member well. So maybe let's talk about that. And why is the member across the way asking the Prime Minister to step down? And maybe the front bench of the cabinet, maybe it's because of things like this and the corruption that really exists on that front bench that he sits behind. I think Canadians are getting tired of this situation and the absolute NDP rampant NDP Liberal government rampant corruption today.
I'm just going to stop it here for a second. I just, again, want to remind members that the debate is with respect to the privilege motion, and I know that there's some latitude, but again, if members can stay on topic, that would be good. And I would just also ask members to please not try to intervene when their colleagues are speaking or when others are speaking. Questions and comments. The honourable member for Barrie Springwater, Oro Medonte.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You have no idea how much I appreciate that. My question this morning is going to be in regards, right on point, because it's about wasted money. And that's really what we're talking about here today in this scandal. I listened to my colleague give a great version of the events that have taken place. We're talking really about ethics commissions that have gone just awry. $400 million have gone elsewhere. People are struggling across Canada. I wanted to ask him about that $400 million that's gone missing and how much that could help his residents, but also now in connection with what we're seeing from the Auditor General's report this morning, where billions of dollars are perhaps now missing. It's just money going out the window everywhere. What does he think about it, and how much could this money be helping the residents of his riding?
The honourable member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Yeah, well, I can tell the member, thank you for the question. I appreciate the member's question. We just did a bunch of interviews with loggers in Fort St. John who are losing their jobs right before Christmas, who are struggling to even put food on the table for a Christmas meal, let alone buy their kids any toys. But I'd say this is even worse than the money. What is worse is the minister is actually ruining. Imagine somebody just comes and takes your wallet. That'd be one thing that's bad enough. This minister's come and taken your wallet, and he's taken your job as well. It's the worst of the worst. And the fact that he's benefiting from that money at the same time, benefiting from the demise of our critical resource sector in the country. It's shameful. He needs to resign, and we need a carbon tax election today.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. The motion that we have before us today is all about having the issue brought over to Proc. No matter what it is that the Conservatives want to say, it is about the leader of the Conservative Party and his borderline contempt of Parliament by continuing to filibuster for weeks now. That borderline contempt is directly connected to the issue of foreign interference when we have a cowardly leader of the Conservative Party who refuses to do the honourable thing and get the security clearance that's required in order to provide...
Sorry, I have a point of order. The honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
Look, we've seen this place descend into a place that we don't want it to go. But to use the word cowardly to describe the leader of the opposition, this member knows better, and he should retract that and apologize.
The honourable parliamentary secretary has a point of order.
On the same point of order, I would withdraw the comment cowardly.
Okay. Does the honourable member want to finish his question very quickly? The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. The bottom line is that the leader of the Conservative Party has a moral obligation to Canadians by getting that security clearance. Can the member give a clear indication why it is that the leader of the official opposition refuses to do what every other leader does and get the security clearance so he can become better informed on foreign interference?
The honourable member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Madam Speaker, the only party guilty of contempt in this House is the NDP Liberals across the way, who refuse to put forward the documents unredacted on the Green Slush Fund, full stop. That's what we're here talking about today. They need to do that. They need to be honest with Canadians and expose their own members who we are alleging are corrupt. What we've seen come out of committee, that they are corrupt. It's just how corrupt are they is the question.
Questions and comments? We have a brief question. The honourable member Barrie Innisfil.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And, watching the debate and watching the Liberals this morning, I can't help but feel that this is a bit of a magician's act. Oh, look, a squirrel. They're trying to distract from a lot of things, including a real whopper this morning, which plays into the SDTC scandal. The Auditor General found that Accenture received $313 million, or 92%, of a total of $342 million in contracts awarded. This happened even though Accenture performed much of the work in Brazil instead of Canada, as the government has claimed. Does the honourable member agree that it's time to rid this country of this government in a carbon tax election and get back to some normalcy and decency? Thank you.
A brief answer from the honourable member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies, and I hope that his colleagues will be quiet.
Yeah, it's a great question. Really, a juxtaposition of what this current government has been doing for the last 9 years, corruption, sending money offshore when Canadians desperately need it here. I can tell you, a Conservative government under the leader from Carleton will bring it home, will change the way things are done, and we're going to bring home Canada that we all know and love. And I just appreciate the Canadians out there, their patience. We need a carbon tax election, and we need it today.